Governor. After you kind of righted the ship when it comes to tier 1 pensions, there's been some progress with that. Now you've got a looming possible $3.2 billion deficit next year in the state budget. But on top of that, you got these 2 pension bills, proposals to fix tier 2, and unions are pushing for that. How much is all that going to cost for tier 2?
Well, it's a little unclear. I mean, the fact is that what we need to do is make sure that we're meeting the Social Security safe harbor minimum, right? So that's something that hasn't been fully calculated. There was one estimate that was done a year plus ago, but we need to figure that out, and that's something, of course, that would be paid over time. So it's not something that needs to get done exactly in the next session. But it's clear that it needs to be dealt with, because otherwise you created a whole other liability for the state.
What was that estimate?
Project 2025, and whether you're using that to spell out legislation that needs to be done?
Look, we're not going to assume that every bit of Project 2025 is necessarily going to be sought after by the Trump administration, but I think that those of us who created Governor's Safeguarding Democracy are really trying to think through what are the things we really expect. Some of it you've seen just in videos that have been released and some talk by some of the proposed leaders of the next administration. And so, we wanted to create a kind of a discussion ground, a common ground for people to come to. By the way, Republicans and Democrats, to talk about how to deal with the changes that are coming and what we need to maybe protect against, and also, how it is that we might work with the administration.
What about state legislature?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, we're not, again, Project 2025 is just one list of potential, bad outcomes that might result from this new administration in Washington. And so we're looking at those things, and I've mentioned, a couple of things that I think we're going to have to address. That again, we don't know, because the administration hasn't taken over, and honestly, they've been a little unclear about what it is that the president wants to do. He says different things about the same topic. So again, what we need to make sure is that we have the governors talking to one another, and our staffs and outsiders providing us with ideas about how to address some of these very challenging issues.
Real quick, what was it?
Yes, but who is going to look 73 million American voters in the eye and say, you made a terrible choice?
I don't think anybody's looking anybody else in the eye and saying that. I think that, it's clear Donald Trump won. He won the popular vote by more than 2%. I wouldn't call that a landslide, but it was certainly a victory. And, it's clear that his administration is going to have the ability to make changes and proposals. And so we're just here, as the state of Illinois, having to deal with whatever those changes may be.
Sorry, Governor, a year ago, what was that estimate for tier 2 real quick?
It was in the news. You can look it up. Okay. I think it was $5 billion, I think. But again, it's something that would be strung out over a number of years, right? Because we'd have to pay into the system, as we do now, over those many years. Again, it's just to deal with the Social Security safe harbor issue.
Governor, the Senate Executive Committee today is going to consider a bill that would ban carbon sequestration under the Mahomet Aquifer. A month ago, you said you weren't sure if that bill was the right solution. I was wondering if you've given that more thought, and if you've had conversations with some of the Central Illinois lawmakers that are pushing that.
Look, let me be clear. We all want to protect the Mahomet Aquifer, and we want to make sure that carbon sequestration is something that's good for the state and for the country and the world.
Governor,
so thinking about legislation about it is the right thing to do. If it needs to be done, remember that the legislation that we passed actually doesn't directly have any threat to the Mahomet Aquifer. So the question is, do you have to have a new piece of legislation to address something that doesn't seem to be the case with the legislation that we already have on the books?
Governor.
Yes. Hi, Isabel. You're going to read it off of there? Okay.
At this moment in time, what qualities would you like to see in the next Democratic presidential nominee?
Well, gosh, let's start with I'd like them to hold democratic values. And there are a lot of things about standing up for the middle class, a lot of things about making sure that we're addressing their freedoms and protecting them that I think that the next Democratic nominee ought to hold. And so I think we've got quite a number of really highly qualified people on the Democratic side. I think you saw some of that. The people, during the last year or two who've, been pushing back on the proposed agenda of the potential Trump administration at that point. Some of those leaders, I think, are terrific people who hold those values.
Governor, the State Representative Dan Calkins said it's a waste of taxpayer dollars to continue to defend the gun ban, especially considering the makeup of the Supreme Court. He says that you should just drop any appeal, save tax dollars.
Well, this is about protecting people's lives. So, no, I think that it's appropriate for us to fight for this law that the legislature passed, I might add, that I signed, and make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep people safe when they're in public, and in private too. And what we passed, frankly, is reasonable. If nobody's grabbing anybody's guns, like the Republicans like to say, we're simply trying to keep people safe with the guns that are already out there and not add to the problem. Yes, sir.
Anybody think that with Think Big America, with the Bullis group you put together, with the gun issue, why should anyone think that you are not running for president in 2028?
That's kind of funny. I mean, first of all, it's 2024. I still have 2 years left to serve in the term that I'm in as governor. As you all have heard me say time and time again, I love this job, and there's an awful lot about it that I believe I can do to protect people from, the problems that seem to want to come from Washington, D.C. over the next 2 years. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And again, you all should, and you've been asking me about re-election. I think that's the relevant conversation to have.
Peter. Legislation that you think Illinois needs to pass before Inauguration Day?
There isn't anything that I can name you right now. I mean, I'm sure that in the discussions that I'm having with the General Assembly, members of the General Assembly, as well as with other governors, things will pop up over the next, little while. But it's not something that I think that we'll have to address during this veto session. I haven't heard anything that has to be addressed right now during this veto session. Having said that, there is time to be able to do that before the January 20th inauguration.
Governor, education spending is
Sure.
a big.
Jones announced his resignation.
Who did? I'm sorry, who did?
Chancellor Jones from the University of Illinois announced that he's ending his tenure in June 2025. What's your reaction?
I hadn't heard that. Did that happen this morning? Or I see. I'm sorry. I've been here. Sorry. What was the question about it?
Your reaction, your thoughts on that? Have you had any conversations with him before he announced this?
No, I'm sorry that he is retiring. I must say, he's really done an outstanding job. There have been so many good things that have happened for UIUC, and I've been proud to work with him, and we've been part of our administration, have been lifting up the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And so, his decision, I understand he has served in academia for quite a long time and in such an important role and had so many accomplishments. He deserves, if he's looking to take a rest, he deserves the opportunity to go do that.
Governor, education funding.
I'm sorry, what? Oh, I haven't even talked to, I know there are probably 4 or 5 people whose names I've heard. I like all of the names that I've heard, so I'm not going to make a decision about that now, about who I might support. But I can say we need to do a lot of building across the nation, especially in states where, not just the battleground states, but I'm talking about states where we need to lift up the Democratic Party that has been less competitive than it should be. An example of that would be the Indiana Democratic Party. Where there's an opportunity in Indiana, because it appears to me anyway that Democrats are doing better and better, the opportunity to elect more to their General Assembly and potentially to statewide office.
Back to your democracy group, how did it come that we need to be protected from our own president?
Well, that's not exactly what the purpose of it is. We're protecting democracy, and we do believe that between the Congress and the president, that there are proposals that I've heard, like we heard recently, I think in the last few days, about the potential for passing laws that would take money away from states where we don't allow prayer in schools. Now, you could say that's a constitutional issue for the Supreme Court, or you could say it's an attack on a state where we need to protect the separation of church and state. So that's something that's, comes out of the president-elect's transition, and I've heard echoed by members of the Congress. So we're going to have to address that.
Education funding's important. Your thoughts on Trump possibly ending the Federal Department of Education? Apparently he wants to return those dollars back to the states.
So think about all the people that you know who have gone through special education programs, all funded, I might add, by the federal government, who would lose out as a result of the decision to do that. Look, we've got a lot that the federal government is a part of. It's about 8 to 10% of most states' education budgets. And to take that away is literally going to be removing education from people who need it.
But he says he wants to return money back to the states.
Great, but what about, are we going to require that special education is a part of what school districts are offering? Because that is what the federal government has been doing, and frankly, we need more, not less.
What are you looking at on environmental regulation as the Trump administration looks at a lot of deregulation?
So I'm not going to go into the list, but I will just say the decision by the Supreme Court last year, well, it's earlier this year, I guess, the Chevron decision, really opens up the possibility that an administration that does not care about clean water and clean air can really hobble our states. And so we're going to have to look very closely at what this means for Illinois, what regulations we already have in place, and what we may need to make changes about. Yeah.
Why is there so little information
Last one, John.
from your administration about the prisons?
Say again.
Why is there so little information about the prisons?
I think we've been really clear about what we're doing.
No one's saying what's going to happen. And the one piece of information that there is that they're going to build 200 the large scale beds when you have such a low population of inmates. Are you planning to close all the prisons and move them to state buildings?
No, you know what what we need to do here. We've got facilities that are 100 years old or 150 years old. I mean, they need to be replaced, and that is all we're looking to do. We've named them. We've told you where the proposed location of those would be. We're frankly trying to do a better job as a state of managing corrections, and that's the purpose that we announced, I don't know, what is it, a year ago almost now, and what we've been working toward. And I think we've been really transparent about what the goals are.
Will you end up
Governor, what have you been,
Thank you, everyone.
What have you been told about